given me the time and the freedom to be able to pursue whatever interest I want. So Bob Jensen, for example, he teaches at UT, he's a tenured faculty member. That means that he has certain pressures in terms of publication and the style of publication that needs to happen. I'm very fortunate to be free from that restraint, though I have more teaching duties, which is fine by me, because I really think that education is exceedingly important. So I don't have a prepared talk, per se. What I really wanted to be able to come in is to be able to be in the circle and say, hi, I'm an anarchist, because I've never been able to do that before. Not the sort of thing that you can say at work. And basically talk about to you also a little bit about what kind of resistance is maybe, I don't want to say that any kind of resistance is bad, because I think that as long as you are resisting and as long as you're fighting the system and you're really thinking about the contradictions that hurt you, that underlie the system, that's really, really important. But at the same time, I do think that some tactics are more useful than others. And so I wanted to lay a little bit of a theoretical foundation as to why that is, and then open this up for discussion. And by the way, if at any point you feel the need to jump in with a question or add a comment, something along those lines, please feel free. I don't want this to be a hierarchical conversation that's pretty much what I'm against. So I want to start by talking to you a little bit about the capitalist economics, the economic system, and the government structure that's required to support it, right? So all of these economists right here, they're pretty much all going to tell you that in order for an economic system to function, you need to have a governmental system that supports it, right? So we couldn't take the feudal government system and apply it to our current economy. It just wouldn't work. And from the Marxist perspective, I do believe that capitalism is collapsing. I believe that that is inevitable, and that once it collapses, then we're going to have a different governmental system to replace it, and I believe that that system is going to be anarchy. Now, how that's going to look, how it's going to shape up, obviously part of what we have to do is to create those new systems that are going to replace the old. And one of my concerns sometimes is that as academics and as protesters as well, we tend to spend a lot of time saying, this is what's wrong, right? And not necessarily creating alternate models of saying, this is what's right. And one of the things that I've really had to deal with in the last 8 months is to accept that what you resist persists, and that what you fight changes who you are, right? That you become like your enemies. And so that part of what we need to do is to create different structures. So I want to just take a moment to say that, there's a lot wrong with the 99% versus 1% language. It's actually the 0.1%, not the 1%. And then there are some people who say that we should talk about it as the 98% in order to represent the 1% of us who are in prison. But I'm not going to necessarily get into that. I'm just going to use the 99% versus 1% nomenclature because that's what we're all comfortable with. So let's just look at the 1% for a moment and their psychology. And the 1% psychology, when they look at you, they don't see a person. What they see is either an asset to be exploited, right? I can pay you for 4 hours of work and then pocket the rest of what you make as your labor. Or they see you as a competitor. Now you might say, okay, when they look at someone and see a competitor, they see an equal. But that's not even the case, because the type of competitor that they see is one that has the ability to potentially turn me into an asset, right? If there's a corporate takeover of my corporation, for example, that they might just gut me and then turn me into an asset. So the point that I'm trying to make is that this is a system that is fundamentally based on fear. It's the fear that I could be turned into an asset, and also the fear that if I don't turn enough of you into an asset, that I'm going to be turned into an asset. And the idea is that there is no amount of money in the world that you can amass that's going to make you feel safe if you're on this model. So when you say, why is Jamie Dimon still going in and being CEO of Chase? Doesn't he have enough money already after the $28 million bonus that he got last year? Isn't that enough to retire? Well, no, because he is in this mindset of, I have to hoard, I have to hoard, I have to hoard, so that I'm not scared. But the problem is, the more money you amass, the dirtier things you have to do to get there, the more fear you have, right? So part of what I'm trying to conceptualize today is how can we move beyond that fear? And for the 99%, obviously, this fear is even more palpable, right? So we live in a state that constantly motivates us through fear, right? Why do I pay my taxes, for example? Now, I'm the sort of progressive who should love paying my taxes, right? April 15th should come around and I should say, yay, we're going to be funding the roads and funding the schools and funding all of these things that are going on. And instead I look at my tax return and say, how many bullets and how many dead Iraqi children did this money that just got taken out of my paycheck that I don't have any way of avoiding getting taken out of my paycheck, where is it going? So the point that I'm trying to make is that the way that the ruling class has been able to continue to rule us is by having us rule each other, by dividing us and conquering us. So all of the conversations that you've heard today about pornography and the hierarchical nature and domination that is displayed there, and all of the problems that that causes between men and women, and then the second talking about issues of racism. My whole point is that all of these hierarchical structures are interconnected, and they come from this idea of looking at you and seeing you as an asset to be exploited. As far as I'm concerned, that is the root of domination, and until we change the economic system that requires us to look at each other that way, there's no way that we're going to be able to overcome domination. So the idea is that you can go about your activism in a couple of different ways. You can go about activism in the sense of pushing for structural change, and I do some of that, right? So I work with Austinites for geographic representation, and we're trying to change the way that city council was elected. If you're interested after the talk, I can tell you more about that. And I've done helping individual persons type of work as well. But I think that when that work is combined, when you're both trying to make a structural change and individually help people, that's when things are best. And that's one of the things that I loved about 24/7 occupation is that I could go down there one day and help deliver food for the homeless, and then 20 minutes later be having a really great theory conversation about, why we should be undermining the system or how we should be doing that, and that could all be done at once. So you might be saying at this point, okay, if Marx has been around for so long, why haven't we seen the revolution already? Why hasn't it already happened? And part of the problem is that those of us who are at the bottom of the hierarchy, instead of recognizing that those of us who are at the top of the hierarchy are also suffering, we want to emulate those people. So Kim Kardashian, why does anybody watch her show? Because for some crazy reason, they want to be like her. Now I say, look at this woman's family. I mean, clearly what these people need is group therapy, not to be on television. And yet for some reason, we want to emulate that lifestyle. We want to emulate that power. And that's part of the insidiousness that you have to remove from your own mind. So one of the things that I've learned from my involvement in the Occupy movement is that the moment that you decide to become radicalized and do something to affect change, that doesn't mean that you don't carry all of these oppressive isms inside of you, okay? So even though I've been working on feminist issues since I was 17 years old, there are still embedded sexisms that are within me, right? And there's still going to be embedded racisms, and there's still going to be embedded classism, right? And within yourself, you need to work to change it, and within a group, you need to work to change it, and that we're all on a continuum, okay? So it's all right if you catch yourself saying something that's racist, because you can change it. That's the idea. This is all a journey that we're all on. So, now how does this relate to the question of the state, right? I started out by saying I'm an anarchist. That means that I don't think that hierarchical states ought to exist, okay? I don't think that a state that is based on the concept of fear ought to exist. And I became an anarchist kind of in an odd way. I was in the middle of teaching Hobbes to an ethics class and talking about how the sovereign comes to have power and how the sovereign uses that power always to his own best benefit, but that his fear of being killed in a violent revolution limits the kinds of laws that he would pass. And I realized, wait a minute, our sovereigns are completely behind the screen. and these laws that are being passed are not in our own best interest. They're not in the interest of the community. They're in the interest of maintaining the status quo. They're in the interest of the corporations that want to make sure that no one has access to the market in order to be able to compete against them, right? Under a well-functioning capitalist economy, what we should have is that if I'm Walmart, I should be looking over my shoulder to see who's going to come up behind me and be a competitor. But what we've effectively done is to bureaucratize the process in such a way that small businesses can't even get the start in order to be able to compete, which means that Walmart can be safe in knowing that I'm going to continue to be in hegemony. So, right, but the community didn't want the Walmart going in at all, for those of you that were following the debate, right? And what ended up happening was there was this lot, it was sold to one developer who said, no, this is what we're going to do, and then they resold it to a Walmart. And then the city kind of went in and said, well, you're going to have to scale it down. But they didn't fully represent the requirements of the people, which was, you know, we don't want this Walmart going in where North Cross Mall used to be at all. And that's kind of the point, is that, you know, even coming at this from the philosophical perspective, there was still a part of me that when I went to City Hall expected that these people still wanted to represent my interests. And then I was involved with the responsible banking campaign, which was trying to get City Hall to move its money out of Bank of America and into a more responsible banking institution. And they ended up moving their money from Bank of America to Chase, which I think we can all agree